This person thought you couldn't handle it, that you would beg, that you would send a message, that you would come back. But you didn't come back. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it hurt too much to keep accepting it. You remained silent, and that dismantled everything. This person expected the usual scene. You apologizing for your feelings. You explaining why you felt hurt. You belittling yourself to keep the peace, but this time there was none of that. No reaction, no comeback. There was distance, there was dignity, there was truth. This person watched. They saw you improving, smiling without forcing it, sleeping without fear, starting to listen to yourself again. And it became clear. It was never you who needed too much. It was this person who thrived on your silence, on your excessive care, on your attempts to hold on to something that was already broken. You didn't fall apart. What crumbled was the ego of someone who thought they were in control. This person won't admit it, but they realize you're different now, stronger, present within yourself. And the hardest thing to accept is this, that you didn't get angry. You didn't seek revenge. You simply didn't want to come back, because you realized nothing that requires you to abandon yourself is worth staying for. This person swore they were irreplaceable, but now they feel the emptiness you once filled, and they understand in silence that they lost what they didn't know how to respect. You left a place that no longer suited you, and those who stay are the ones who never realized how hard you were fighting to be seen. This person thought you wouldn't endure, not just the absence, but the echo, the shock, the breaking of the cycle. They thought the first day without a response from you would be unbearable for you, that the loneliness would weigh you down, that you would rush back just to avoid feeling what, by the way, you were already feeling even when together. They thought it would be enough to disappear for a bit, cut off attention, disrupt the signals of affection. It would only take stepping back just enough to make you believe you were losing something valuable, something irreplaceable. But this time, something within you didn't fall into the trap anymore, because you realized it wasn't that person's disappearance that harmed you. It was their presence, full of subtle demands, emotional manipulation disguised as concern, and sarcasm that followed right after a "I'm just kidding." And the hardest part of all, this person truly thought you wouldn't be able to handle living without their weight. But you not only managed, you blossomed. In the first few days, yes, there was an emptiness, but not because you wanted the person back. You wanted to understand where you had gone. Among all the concessions, the justifications, the pauses you took in yourself to keep someone who was never fully present, it was you who was trying the whole time to make sense of what this person made seem confusing. It was you who carried the guilt, the effort, the fear. This person knew that and used it. They thought your conscience was a weakness, that your silence was submission, that your desire to resolve things was desperation, but it wasn't. It was an exhausted heart trying not to lose itself. You realized, but not overnight. It happened in small scenes, in the way this person changed moods when you were too happy, in the way compliments came followed by veiled criticisms, in the way they would applaud you, but with limits, only up to the point where it didn't threaten their control. You didn't understand everything right away, but you felt it. You felt that it was no longer sustainable. You felt that something was drying you up inside. You felt there was more absence in that presence than in any silence you had ever faced. And one day, but you stopped justifying, not because you became cold, but because you became clear-headed. This person tried the last trick, to disappear, hoping you would chase after them. They went silent, waiting for the old dynamic to unfold. But this time, you stayed quiet too. Only your silence wasn't a game. It was the end. And this end wasn't loud. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't disdain, it was freedom. The freedom that begins when you stop trying to prove you deserve to stay, when you stop chasing someone who's always turned away. You didn't grow cold. You became whole. And the one who always fed off your confusion realized. That person swore you wouldn't know how to move on without them. But now they see you genuinely laughing, talking with more ease, living without fear of stumbling into judgments. They see you looking better, not because something changed on the outside, but because what lived inside you before was exhaustion. Today, it's presence, yours. That person misses you, yes, but won't say it. They'll disguise it as pride, as anger, as criticism about your new way. They'll say you've become selfish, distant, cold, but what you've become is free. You no longer owe your energy to keep people who don't know how to stand on their own. That person will keep trying to poke at your absence. They'll watch your stories. They'll like an old photo. They'll send an ambiguous quote. They'll use mutual friends to comment that you've changed too much. But now none of that moves you anymore. Because you saw, you felt, you realized. It wasn't love. It was fear. It wasn't connection. It was emotional imprisonment. It wasn't partnership. It was dependence disguised as exclusivity. And you walked away, not with fanfare, but with dignity. You're not going back. And that's what's heaviest. That person may never admit it, but deep down they know they lost. They lost someone who still looked at them with affection, even after being hurt. Someone who tried to understand even the silences. Someone who just wanted space to be, but only received limits. And now they realize that the value was where they failed to recognize it, that the attention they thought they could manipulate was, in fact, the very last thread that kept you there. And when you let go, it wasn't out of anger. You let go because you chose yourself. That person swore you were weak, wore you. But now see your strength in how you no longer respond to what doesn't deserve a response, in how you no longer defend yourself against accusations that don't make sense, in how you disappear, but without hiding, because now you are present where you are welcomed, and silent where you are disrespected. She feels your absence because your presence was never light. It was too strong to be forgotten. It was too real to be replaced. And now, too late to relearn what was never valued. You are not cold. You are mature. You are not selfish. You are whole. You are not bitter. You are selective. And what this person feels today is the taste of emptiness she claimed you couldn't bear. But now she lives it, alone. Because what you offered was rare, and she thought it was common, you realized. Those who belittle you never deserve you. This person didn't see, or pretended not to see, that you were emptying inside, little by little. Every time you stayed silent to avoid provoking another crisis. Every time you accepted the emotional game, just to avoid the feeling of abandonment. Every time you smiled reluctantly, just to maintain the image that all was well. But it wasn't. And what hurts the most isn't the end. It's realizing that for a long time, you stopped being yourself, to be what this person could tolerate. You see that now, with more clarity than you wanted, with more pain than you deserved, but with more strength than you ever imagined you had. Because now you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to expose your reasons. You don't need to justify why you left. Those who need to understand have already understood. Even if they'll never admit it, this person feels your absence. But not for the company, for the influence. You were an emotional compass. You were a point of support. You were a silent presence that held everything up, even when no one saw. Now that you are no longer there, everything wobbles. Everything loses the balance you maintained silently. And this person is struggling internally because she knows she will never have that back. Because you realize that what she called drama was just your soul asking for space. And you finally stopped begging for space where you should be welcomed. Now you breathe, no longer with relief, but with presence. You inhabit your own body again. Your laughter comes without fear. Your silence isn't empty, it's comforting. Your gaze no longer seeks validation in eyes that only knew how to judge. This person on the outside sees you with a different energy, with a different vibe, with a different posture, and maybe they think you've become someone cold, distant, arrogant, but what they see is someone who has grown tired of being small just to fit. This person no longer has access. They no longer know what you feel. They don't know who you hang out with. They don't know how you feel upon waking. And this consumes them. Because before everything belonged to them. Your time, your attention, their urgency. Now it's yours. You no longer need to respond to messages at odd hours. You don't need to explain your own lightness. You don't need their eyes approving your every move. You are back to yourself. And no one enters without an invitation. This person will try to repeat the cycle. Because they learned that relationships thrive on control. But you've learned something else. What is true never diminishes you. It never blames you for feeling too much. It never looks at you as if you were hard to love. And for that, you don't go back. Not out of pride, but out of sanity, out of integrity, out of respect for what you needed to rebuild in silence after everything crumbled inside. You've set aside that idea that you needed to earn love. Now you understand, if you have to earn it, it's not love. If you have to silence yourself, it's not acceptance. If you have to ask for the basics, it's prison. And this person The one who swore you would beg to stay, today feels the absence of something they no longer know where to find. Because no one else will offer what you offered. Because no one else will insist like you insisted. Because no one will ever love like you did, even when ignored, belittled, or misunderstood. That person lost something they may never fully grasp. But you know. You lived every detail, every lump in your throat, every silent night, every tear hidden in the shower. And today, you hide nothing anymore. You are whole. If someone wants to come in, it's different now. They'll have to come in light, with truth, with presence, because the wound that bled is now a scar, and scars have memory. It doesn't hurt anymore, but it teaches. And you learned. That person hurt you, but will never admit it, because in their mind it was you who overreacted, you who were too sensitive, you who distorted everything, you who didn't know how to play, you who takes everything personally. That person will shield themselves from the truth, because if they confront what they truly did to you, they'll have to admit they used love as a tool, that they manipulated your guilt, that they diminished your strength, that they made you doubt your own perception, and they can't handle that, because it demands awareness, and awareness demands a soul. You spent months trying to figure out where you were going wrong, trying to fix yourself, to reshape yourself, to adjust, just so that person would look at you with the same sparkle as before, the same gaze that captivated you in the beginning, but later turned into coldness, demands, superiority. And deep down, you knew, no matter how hard you tried, it would never be enough, because that person needed you to feel insufficient. That's what kept control in their hands, not love, but the dependency they nurtured in silence. You noticed, late but you noticed. Now you don't need any more explanations, because you realized it wasn't you who lost. It was that person who never lived up to the commitment they received. And yes, they realize this too, even if they don't say it, even if they pretend to move on with their life. They notice in the way you no longer react, in the way you no longer justify yourself, the way you no longer need to prove your worth. That's unsettling, because it shows that you've stepped out of the dynamic. You've stopped revolving around someone who only knew how to push you down. And now that you're standing tall, that person no longer knows how to reach you. They try a few tricks. They send a message out of the blue. They ask an unnecessary question just to strike up a conversation. They post generic statements with specific veiled references. They make a point of being seen, of being noticed, of still taking up space. But what they don't understand is that the space now belongs to you. You no longer fill the void with someone else's presence. You don't distract yourself with promises that were never kept. You don't fall for gestures that only come when they feel they're losing control. You don't react anymore, because now you feel, and those who truly feel don't go back to what caused the hurt. They notice, and that eats away at them inside. Because deep down they know they will never find someone who would tolerate what you tolerated, who would care even when hurt, who would insist even when exhausted, who would silence their pain just to keep a connection alive. And you know the cruelest part? They don't have the courage to apologize to you, because to do that they would have to admit their wrongdoing. And they'd rather lose than face the fact that they hurt someone who only wanted to be loved. But you no longer wait for that. You don't want an apology that would come with justifications, with, "But you did this too," with, "I didn't know it was that serious." You don't want anything more, not because you hate them, but because you don't need it anymore. And that's the end. The end they never believed you could reach. This person lost you, not when you walked away, but the moment you realized you shouldn't try anymore. That moment when you silently saw it just wouldn't work, that it was no longer love, that it was no longer peace, that it was no longer you. It was then that the silent decision was born. It was then that something inside you said, "Enough." And since then, every step you've taken has been a step back to yourself. Not to someone else, but to you. You've gone inward, to your essence, to your calm, to your clarity. And now, that person knocks on the door, but they find no one willing to open it. Because what was there has been emptied out from trying too hard. You're not cold, you're protected. You're not bitter. You're selective, you're not vengeful, you're clear-headed. You no longer need to defend yourself. Your absence does that for you. And deep down, that person knows they will never find someone like you again. Because someone like you doesn't come around twice. You can't buy someone like you. You can't convince someone like you with any old line. You don't return just because you are called. Someone like you only stays where they are seen. only loves where they are respected, only gives where they are welcomed. And when you leave, you really leave. No turning back, no access, no loopholes. You've become the period at the end of your own story. And that changes everything. If this text is hurting, it's because you needed it. Comment below, "I'm returning to myself," if this message spoke directly to your story. Or write, "I realized it late, but there's still time," if you're in this process right now. That person didn't destroy you. They revealed you. Revealed what you were willing to tolerate. Revealed how much you lost trying to save the other. Revealed what you will never accept again. If this resonated with you, give a like, share your thoughts, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dives.